Today I'm sharing 3 color grading techniques that have saved me a lot of time. Let's start with matching similar shots. Here I've got a multicam sequence, but this technique works for matching any kind of close-ups with wider shots. We shot this with 3 different types of camera using different exposure and white balance settings, so where's the best place to start? I've repositioned the close-ups and cropped them, which will make it easier to compare rather than seeing the shots side by side. Plus, we can toggle them on and off to play spot the difference. So even after I've used color management to convert the Nikon, Sony and Canon footage from log, we've still got plenty of work to do to make things seamless, especially on the right. So let's do the easy one first. The Canon footage looks too dark, so I've boosted the highlights up, and that's it, we're already looking much closer. I can check the waveform to see that the 2 shots are matched in terms of exposure, and then my next node adjusts the color temperature and the tint until it matches by eye. I reckon that's close enough for the sake of this video. This next one is more of a challenge since I messed up the white balance in camera. It's looking very pink. I've adjusted the levels with my first node, but I want to show you what happens when I use the tint control to try and take out those pink hues. The wall starts to turn green. So let's undo that and just use the tint to make sure that the color of the wall matches. Whereas for the skin tones, I'm using a nice smooth hue versus hue curve to make his skin tones more green without affecting the rest of the image. I've done the same with the blues, just moving them until the shirt matches. So now the hues are pretty consistent. You can see that the saturation is too strong when I toggle between them. So I've backed off the saturation down to 38 until it matches. So here's the before and here's the after. It's so easy to check my work and make sure we've got a nice match when the close-ups are overlaid like that. Once I'm happy, I can simply reset the crop and position of the close-ups, and hopefully you'd never know that we used 3 different camera brands to shoot this. So for this next time-saving technique, I've got a music video that I've been working on for Kumara, and I've censored some of the shots to avoid spoilers, but I wanted to take you on a bit of a tour of how I've got this set up for maximum efficiency. Firstly, I've put most of my grade on the timeline, so it's automatically applied to every single shot. I started with some contrast, a bit of saturation boost, and a vignette. So before I start grading individual clips, I'm going to group the shots by scene. So I'm selecting all of the shots that I want to match. I'll jump back into the clip mode so that I can add them to a group called Breakfast, which I created for this scene. Now that those shots are in a group, I can adjust all 6 at the same time, starting with contrast, then temperature and tint, and saturation. So these nodes only apply to the shots in that group, which is really helpful. The only time I need to make adjustments to individual clips is if there's something unique to that shot. So here I'm going to adjust the levels of this shot so that it matches with the rest of the group. These overhead shots look a little dark, so I'll adjust their levels and then copy it over. These close-ups are quite similar, so I've put them in a separate group, and all I need is one node to adjust the contrast so that it matches. Then my last group is for the shots in this scene, so I can adjust the levels, temperature, tint and saturation for everything in that set. Now clearly these 2 don't match, so I'm jumping into clip mode to brighten one of the shots and then copying the grade over. Now we can see the whole group and check a before and after, quickly adjusting the group if we need to. So at this point every scene and shot is pretty consistent, so I should be able to go back to the timeline grade and work on it kind of globally. So I'll add a bit of pink to the shadows of every shot, plus some blur and film grain. Next I can add my highlight bloom effects and make sure they're looking good on the other shots in the timeline too, giving us the retro look that the artist was after. And the last thing to do is to jump back into clip mode to finish off with some power windows for those individual shots. So if you're using other color grading software, you might use adjustment layers in order to kind of give this grouping effect. But I really like the way that Resolve sets this up. It's so much faster than putting my grade on every single clip. Now I kind of think it's cheating when people only use really expensive cameras for their color grading tutorials. So for this next technique, I've got some old 8-bit 1080p Canon T3i footage. I was filming next to a window, so as the sun went down, we can see the brightness and the temperature of the footage changing. So what if I wanted to fix this quickly without wasting lots of time? So first I'm going to chuck them into a group just to add some contrast to all 4 of the shots, which tends to heighten the differences between them. But this time I'm matching 2 shots at a time, so I can use the waveform to compare them precisely. Then I'll repeat that process for the other shots, brightening and warming the footage as the sun goes down. These last 2 shots need a bit more saturation in the shadows since they were underexposed, and some noise reduction for exactly the same reason. So this is what we started with, and here they are after a bit of color correction. Now this whole time I've been working with the first frame of each shot, so to finish the job I'll scrub through the footage looking for any lighting changes that happen between the cuts. Sure enough, this long clip seems to be getting gradually darker. So here is my final time-saving technique. Rather than messing around with keyframes, which I hate doing for color grading, I reckon it's faster to just split the clip near the end and color correct it as if it's a separate clip. So now that I've adjusted the last part of that second clip to match the others, I can just slip the edit over to the center of the clip and add a nice big crossfade to it, so we gradually transition between the color from the first frame and the color at the end of the shot. So I've used this technique with nightmarish footage where the lighting is fading brighter and darker all throughout, and it's just a case of kind of repeating this process. I find it's much faster and more intuitive to use with crossfades rather than trying to use keyframes on a graph. So there we have it. Color grading individual shots is of course important, but I hope this video has given you some ideas that will save you time so that you can spend your time doing the things that are more creative and fun. I'm Simon Cade, this is DSLR Guide, and I'll see you next time.